Hey guys, thanks for joining me today. My name is Guy Britton and I'm a mix engineer and a producer, and in today's video we're going to be talking about MIXBUS processing using just stock plugins. You may have seen my previous video where I break down my MIXBUS chain using a variety of third-party plugins, but today I'm going to show you how I still manage to achieve great results even when I've only got stock plugins to work with. We're going to be working in Logic Pro today, but it doesn't matter if you're not a Logic Pro user because these techniques can still apply to any DAW. If you are a Logic user though, I want to take a second to let you know that I've got an offer running on my Ultimate Mastering Pack, which contains 10 custom unique mastering presets and MIXBUS presets for Logic Pro X. All you need to do is follow the link in the description below and use the code YouTube25 to get 25% off that pack right now. So yeah, in the meantime, let's jump in and take a look at what's going on. So the track we're working with today is a track called Bad For Us by Camille. Camille's a great artist and this is a really cool kind of dynamic pop thing. So I'll play you a bit of the track and then we'll take a look at what's going on the MIXBUS.
I'm sorry, I couldn't give you the birthday you deserved. It's all my fault, I broke you first, I know that very well. I'm sorry, but I still got your baseball cap and the stub of a ticket for a film we skipped to make out in the back of a cab. But the long nights and the same fights we've had for months keep stacking up, and I'm so tired, but I can't lie, I kinda like the rush. I'm sorry, screaming from the driver's seat. If I'm not happy, why don't I just leave? Staring at the white lines on the pavement so you don't cry looking at me. I'm sorry, hanging in the air, the words I can't take back. Even though I love you, I know myself enough to know I'm bad for us.
So the first thing you'll notice is that I'm working with this dedicated MIXBUS that I've created rather than putting the plugins on the stereo out. This is just personal preference. You can do this all on the stereo out. I just feel like this gives me a bit more control. It allows me to trim the level if things are getting too hot. Also allows me to have my room correction and stuff on the stereo out separate from what's going on my MIXBUS. Like I say, it's just a personal preference. So anyway, let's jump in. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up one of my own mastering presets from the Ultimate Mastering bundle that I mentioned. I'm going to go setting, and then I'm going to go to user channel strip settings, Ultimate Mastering. And I'm going to start with the punchy pop master preset. Now, it's worth saying that as with any presets, they are just starting points, a place to jump off from when you start mixing. It's by no means a kind of set it and forget it. I encourage you to tweak. I encourage you to change things to suit the track. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to go through each plugin, see what it's doing, dial it into taste as a place to kind of start with the mix. So we're going to start sort of from the pre-chorus here, and I'm just going to turn all the plugins off and we'll go through them one by one. It's worth saying that this is quite a dynamic tune, like I said, so we don't want to be squashing the life out of it. We want to make sure we're giving it room to breathe. That's going to factor into my thinking when it comes to mixing this. So let's put this section on a loop. The first plugin in the chain is the gain plugin. And this is really just a level trim to make sure that you're kind of hitting the plugins at the required level. If your mix is too hot before the MIXBUS, this is a quick and easy way of just kind of bringing the level down. If you're not quite kind of getting enough level and you feel like you need to turn the whole mix up a little bit before the plugins on the MIXBUS, it's an easy way of doing it. I generally like to kind of aim for somewhere around about -10 dBFS. It's not an exact science, but I know it's kind of a healthy level. So we'll just see what this mix is doing in terms of level. And if we need to turn anything up or down, we can just do it really quickly with this plugin.
But the long nights and the same fights we've had for months keep stacking up, and I'm so tired, but I can't lie, I kinda like the rush. I'm sorry, screaming from the driver's seat. If I'm not happy, why don't I just leave? Staring at the white lines on the pavement so you don't cry looking at me. I'm sorry.
Okay, cool. That's coming in at like -10, somewhere around there. That's good. It's a healthy level. Don't need to think about it much more than that. That sounds good. Okay, so the first plugin in the chain is the compressor plugin, and you'll see in Logic we have these different types of compression going along the top. I'm going to go for the vintage VCA, which is like an SSL style compressor. That's going to give us a nice punchy, tight sound. Classic kind of compressor for this sort of style. It's worth saying as well that we're not trying to iron out the dynamics with MIXBUS compression. We're just trying to bring a bit more energy. Often it's about kind of bringing up the things that are at the back of the track, so stuff like the reverbs and the delays and that kind of energy that's behind the track is bringing that forward a little bit more, making the mix feel a little bit more cohesive. So that's the aim of this. So let's take a listen to what's going on. In terms of settings, I've got the ratio set to 2:1, so it's quite gentle. Medium, slowish attack, fast release. I'm just going to turn off the distortion. I'm also going to make sure that the auto gain is turned off. I think it defaults to -12, which adds loads of level. We don't want that. So let's make sure that, like I say, the distortion's turned off, the auto gain's off. We're going to set it up like this, and then we're going to focus on the relationship between the threshold and the attack to begin with, and make sure that we're making it sound nice and punchy, that we're not killing those transients.
Sorry, screaming from the driver's seat. If I'm not happy, why
Okay, that's cool. It feels like it's bringing it together a little bit more. What's interesting to me is that the attack time on this goes all the way to 200 milliseconds. Now, I've got an SSL style hardware compressor over here and a bunch of SSL style compressor plugins, and all of them, the slowest attack time that you can go to is 30 milliseconds. On this, it goes, like I say, all the way to 200. 30 milliseconds on this sounds faster than 30 milliseconds on the other ones. So I don't know how accurate this is. But around about 40, 50 milliseconds, somewhere around there feels good to me. It feels like it's letting the kick drum through. We're just kind of not squashing the transients too much, but it's doing a good job of bringing the mix together. One other thing to note is if we go to this sidechain section up here, we can set a sidechain high pass. In this case, it's about 116 hertz. And what that's doing is just allowing the low end below 116 hertz to pass through uncompressed. It's not triggering the compressor. And that's useful because sometimes like too much low end in that MIXBUS compression is just going to make especially in a track like this where it's quite low end heavy, it's really going to make the compressor work harder than it needs to. So we just let that low end through and it's going to compress everything above 116 hertz, and that's doing a good job. So next up in the chain, we've got the enveloper. This is a cool little tool. What it does essentially is it's almost like a transient designer. It's just boosting the transients a little bit. So we've got 24% added on the attack. We're not touching the release. I would generally use this on things like drums, kick drums, snare drums, but it's nice sometimes on the MIXBUS just to add a little bit extra punch to it, a bit extra snap to those transients. We'll take a listen to what it's doing. We don't want too much. It's got to be subtle or else it's just going to wreck the mix. But I will crank it just to show you what it does, and then we'll dial it into where it should be. So let's take a listen.
From the driver's seat, if I'm not happy, why don't I just leave? Staring at the white lines on the pavement, so you don't cry looking at me. I'm sorry, hanging in the air, the words I can't take back. Even though I love you, I know myself. From the driver's seat, if I'm not happy, why don't I just leave? Staring at the white lines on the pavement, so you don't cry looking at me. I'm sorry, hanging in the air, the words I can't take back, even though I love you.
Cool. It's quite subtle, but I think it's just adding a little bit more punch to that kick drum. Those downbeats feel like they're accented a little bit more. But it's not so intrusive that it's kind of affecting the vocal and other things like that. So we're going to leave it around about there. Like I say, subtle, but it's just adding a little bit extra bump to it. Next up in the chain, we've got the graphic EQ. I'm actually going to switch this out because I like the graphic EQ. I think it sounds really cool. But on a track like this, sometimes it sounds a bit gritty, a bit edgy. And what I'm looking for is a really smooth top end on this track. So I'm going to go to the EQ, I'm going to go to the vintage EQ collection, and I'm going to pull up the Tube EQ instead. This is a plugin that I really love, and I think on a MIXBUS it works really nicely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the frequency to around about 10K somewhere. Let's go high bandwidth. So what this is going to do is a really broad EQ around about 10K, and then we're going to boost that, see if we can make it shine a little bit more, maybe add some low end punch as well. Let's take a listen to what that's doing.
From the driver's seat, if I'm not happy, why don't I just leave? Staring at the white lines on the pavement, so you don't cry looking at me. I'm sorry, hanging in the air, the words I can't take back, even though I love you, I know myself enough to know I'm bad for us. From the driver's seat, if I'm not happy, why don't I just leave? Staring at the white lines on the pavement, so you don't cry looking at me. I'm sorry, hanging in the air, the words I can't take back, even though I love you, I know myself enough to know I'm bad for us. From the driver's seat, if I'm not happy, why don't I just leave? Staring at the white lines on the pavement, so you don't cry looking at me.
Cool. I feel like we've really opened the track up now. It feels a lot airier, a lot brighter, a lot punchier in the low end, which is exactly what we want from a mix like this. So the next thing that I want to do is add a bit more width and energy to the mix. And in order to do that, I need to do some mid-side processing. So you'll see that the next plugin in the chain is the Fat Effects, but we're going to ignore that for now. I'm going to bring up another instance of EQ. In this case, I'm going to use the linear phase EQ, which if you haven't seen it in Logic, it looks basically exactly the same as the channel EQ, just a bit darker, but it's working in linear phase mode, which means that any changes that we make, particularly on the MIXBUS, it's not going to make drastic changes to the phase relationship of the track. Sometimes, like particularly when we're working in mid-side mode, if you make big boosts to certain frequencies, it can really pull things out of phase, make things sound a bit weird. So this is just going to give us a tighter sound. We're going to go down to the processing, and we're going to change this to side only. And now this is going to be working in mid-side mode, but working just on the sides. And this is a trick that I love to do where basically we boost the sides of the mix in the top end, and it gives the illusion that the mix is wider and kind of brighter. on the sides, and like I said, it just gives it a bit more energy, a bit more excitement, opens the mix up a little bit more. Then we're going to filter out the low end on the side as well, and that makes the bass really focused and keeps it like dead in the center. So I'm going to roll off everything up to about 100 hertz or so. I'm going to be too dramatic with it and just keep that out of the sides, and I'm going to boost the top end. But let's dial this in as we go. So I'll play a bit of the track and we'll dial in this top end.
From the driver's seat in my unhappy wide all night asleep, staring at the white lines on the pavement, so you don't dare looking at me. I'm tired, hanging in the air, the words I can't take back. Even though I love you, I know myself enough to know I'm bad for us. From the driver's seat in my unhappy wide all night asleep, staring at the white lines on the pavement, so you don't dare looking at me.
Cool, so you can hear that's really helped to add a lot of energy and width to that mix. Feels a lot more exciting now. We're doing some quite extreme settings, like there's 10k boost here at like 3.5k, 3.5 dB at 2.5k. Just pushing a lot of the mid-range and a lot of top end in those wide areas of the mix, helping those BVs cut through a bit more, some of that reverb. It's just adding a lot more excitement. You might want to dial it back. You might think it's too much. I'm going to leave it where it is for now because I think it sounds cool, and we'll move on. So the next plugin in this chain is the Fat Effects, which if you haven't had a chance to check it out, I recommend you do. A lot of people sleep on this plugin in Logic. It's really cool. There's a lot of stuff to it, and a lot of stuff that we're not going to be using in this video. I'm just using the distortion section and the bass enhancer section. We've got like a whole filter thing going on, a compressor, some modulation that you can use to modulate all of these filters and so on. I'm not going to be doing any of that. I'm just focusing on purely the bass enhancer and this distortion section. You'll see in this distortion section we have different types of distortion. I'm going to be working with the tube distortion. I might try out some of the soft saturation as well. I just want to add a bit of richness, some extra harmonics to the mix. I don't want to distort the mix per se. I just want to kind of add a bit more richness to it. Same with this bass enhancer. I'm just looking to add a bit more depth, a bit more kind of low end thickness. And then we're just going to blend this in with the mix control. So I'm going to start with the mix at 100%. It's probably going to be a bit extreme. You can hear the mix is probably going to be clipping through this kind of distortion section, but we're going to dial it in and then bring it back and set it in where it should be. So let's take a listen to what that's doing. From the driver's seat in my unhappy wide all night asleep, staring at the white lines on the pavement, so you don't dare looking at me. I'm tired, hanging in the air, the words I can't take back. Even though I love you, I know myself enough to know I'm bad for us. From the driver's seat in my unhappy wide all night asleep, staring at the white lines on the pavement, so you don't dare looking at me. I'm tired, hanging in the air, the words I can't take back. Even though I love you, I know myself enough to know I'm bad for us. From the driver's seat in my unhappy wide all night asleep, staring at the. So that's cool, bringing a bit of that exciter in, some of that soft saturation. The tube saturation is a bit too gritty, so we've literally just got like 7% of it. But I think that's cool. It's adding a bit more kind of energy, a bit more richness to that track. So let's see what this bass enhancer is doing. From the driver's seat in my unhappy wide all night asleep, staring at the white lines on the pavement, so you don't dare looking at me. I'm tired, hanging in the air, the words I can't take back. Even though I love you, I know myself enough to know I'm bad for us. From the driver's seat in my unhappy wide all night asleep, staring at the white lines on the pavement, so you don't dare looking at me. I'm tired, hanging in the air, the words I can't take back. Even though I love you, I know myself enough to know I'm bad for us. From the driver's seat in my unhappy wide all night asleep, staring at the white lines on the pavement, so you don't dare looking at me. I'm tired, hanging in the air, the words I can't take back. Even though I love you, I know myself enough to know I'm bad for us. From the driver's seat in my unhappy wide all night asleep. Cool, I could play around with that for days just trying to find the sweet spot, but I think that generally sounds good. It's cool to like boost this bass enhancer quite a lot, around about 60 hertz, 59 hertz, and then give us quite a lot of excitement with this exciter and a little bit of saturation, and then just blend that in really subtly. I think that's a good way of giving the mix a bit more thickness, a bit more richness, That low end feels thicker, the top end feels a bit shinier. You can hear the bass enhancement, you can hear that excitement, but I think it's more about just kind of giving the mix a bit more richness, and that does a good job. So yeah, I'm happy with how that's sounding. We could dial this in to taste a little bit more if we wanted to, but I think for the sake of time, that sounds good. And the last plugin in the chain, besides the multimeter, which is literally just a meter, it's not actually doing anything to the audio. The last plugin is the adaptive limiter. In terms of limiting, like my usual use for a limiter is just to get the mix loud so that the client can hear what it sounds like when it's sent to mastering. Most of the mixes that I do get sent off to another mastering engineer to be mastered. So when I send it off to the mastering engineer, I'm not sending it off with the limiter on. I'm giving them the headroom to work with it. My use for a limiter, like I say, is just to get it to a point where it sounds good for the client. They're going to know what it sounds like when it is loud and when it's punchy. So that's what we're going to try and do here, is just get it to a point, like it's really not that complicated, get it to a point where it's loud, but like we're not squashing the life out of it. And I set the output ceiling to 0.1 dBFS, which is as loud as we can get before we hit 0. Then we're just going to dial in some gain. I've turned the gain down here because it was initially set to like 10 dB, which is just going to blow my head off, blow your head off. We don't want that. So I'm going to set it to 0. I'm going to turn my headphones down as well because it's going to get louder. And then we'll just dial this in. That's good. I don't need it to be any louder than that. I don't need to do any more limiting than that. It still sounds good, still preserves the dynamics, but it's nice and loud, nice and punchy still. I'm just literally knocking off a few dB of gain reduction. I don't want to squeeze it. I'm going to leave that to a mastering engineer to do. For me, just with this plugin, like I say, it's just about getting a level. Let's go back and listen to what we've done to the mix. I'm going to turn the limiter off and keep it off because it's not really telling us anything other than the mix is louder. I'll turn the rest of these plugins on and off and see what difference we've made.
Sorry, I couldn't give you the birthday you deserved. It's all my fault, I broke you first. I know that very well. I'm sorry, but I've still got your baseball cap and the stub of a ticket for a film we skipped to make out in the back of a cab. But the long nights and the same fights we've had for months keep stacking up, and I'm so tired, but I can't lie, I kinda like the rush. I'm sorry, screaming from the driver's seat. If I let happy, why don't I just leave? Staring at the white lines on the pavement so you don't cry looking at me. I'm sorry, hanging in the air, the words I can't take back. Even though I love you, I know myself enough to know I'm bad for us. It's
So yeah, hopefully you can hear what a difference we've made. We've gone from something which is like a good mix, but it's a reasonably flat sounding mix, to something which is alive. There's a lot of width, a lot of energy. We've really opened up that top end. We've given that low end some thickness, and we've done this all just using stock plugins. So, you know, don't think that just because you don't own a bunch of expensive third-party plugins or you don't have some fancy hardware, you can't do great mixes, because you can. There's so much power in these stock plugins, like I said before, and I'll keep saying it again. Do not sleep on these stock plugins. And even if you're not a Logic user, stock plugins in basically any DAW will replicate the same thing. So you can port this over to Pro Tools, to FL Studio, to Ableton, Cubase, whatever it is you're using, the principles still apply. But if you are a Logic user, like I said, I'm going to leave a link in the description below for you to check out my Ultimate Mastering Pack, which includes 10 custom mastering chains and MIXBUS chains for Logic Pro. We use one of these today, the Punchy Pop Master. That's in the pack, that's included below, and you get 25% off if you use the code in the description below. So thanks for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you soon.